We need in every community a group of angelic troublemakers.
Social justice, power hour, power hour, power hour. Social justice, power hour, power hour, power hour.
Good evening to our friends on the East Coast, good afternoon to our friends on the West Coast, and good in-between time to our friends in the in-between spaces, which we all find ourselves more and more these days. Thanks for joining us. This is indeed the Social Justice Power Hour. This is the virtual headquarters of the Bayard-Rustin Center for Social Justice. Welcome. My name is Robert Sayers-Schreiber. I'm the chief activist here at the center and your host for the Power Hour tonight, as I have been for over 200 episodes now. We've been doing this show for 200 some odd episodes, many of them very odd indeed. And we're thrilled and honored tonight to welcome to our virtual stage David Litt, who was a speechwriter for Barack Obama, special assistant to Barack Obama, author of 2 delightful books. We're going to have a really extraordinary, meaningful, and delightful conversation tonight. And before we get to that, though, a couple of things I do want to share with you, because we have a whole bunch of folks watching tonight who are regular viewers, but also new folks who are, I'm sure, are fans of David. So please know that we do this show every weeknight at 7 p.m., 4 p.m. Pacific, and we're thrilled and honored that you join us for this, and hope that you'll join us again. And I want to entice you by sharing with you some upcoming guests. Tomorrow night, we have renowned folk musician David Brzezinski doing a concert from his very porch, love songs for lovers of life. If you've ever seen David Brzezinski, you know that he is a phenomenal talent and a beautiful spirit. So tomorrow night should be a great concert with David Brzezinski. And then coming up in the future, we have this gentleman who needs no introduction, Billy Eichner, who can't be on the street right now, so we're going to present on the Power Hour Billy Not on the Street. We also have Frederick Joseph, whose book, The Black Friend on Being a Better White Person, came out just yesterday. So happy Pub Day to Frederick, and we're looking forward to having a really powerful conversation with him. Maggie Smith, beautiful poet and author, wonderful works, just released a book of prose, inspirational for the pandemic, called Keep Moving. We're looking forward to sharing some time with her. Peniel Joseph, Dr. Joseph, the author, of course, of The Sword and the Shield, which exposes the false dichotomy between Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. Also, proud to say, a board member here at the center. Through his joining us in the Power Hour, we have engaged in so many meaningful conversations. We're thrilled to have Dr. Joseph back with us again. Coming up as well, we have Talia Lavin. Talia wrote an incredible book called Culture Warlords. It's about her going undercover, exposing white supremacist rings. It's an incredibly difficult book. It's an incredibly horrifying experience, obviously, but somehow she keeps her sense of humor throughout it all. So it's quite an interesting experience to go through with her. So that conversation should be pretty extraordinary. Franklin Leonard, the creator of The Blacklist, will be with us. Looking forward to Pete Souza being with us. White House photographer under 2 presidents, Ronald Reagan and Barack Obama, sharing some of his favorite photos from his tenure at 2 White Houses, behind-the-scenes stories, and also, if you haven't seen his wonderful movie, The Way I See It, it's a great film. It's on MSNBC right now. Make sure that you view it. It's your homework before he shows up and joins us. And then finally, this gentleman. This is a personal thrill for me. Michael Penn, musician, activist, released his first song in 15 years just about a month ago for various good causes. And now we're going to be thrilled to host the first full-length interview with Michael since he released that song. We also found out just today that we're going to be showing some never-before-seen live footage from his days back at Largo in LA, which also includes, delightfully, some heckling from Patton Oswalt himself. So it should be a great night indeed. So all that is just some of what's coming up in the Power Hour. Those are just highlights. So please be here with us, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. And one last thing before we bring our extraordinary guest on is, many of you know, last Friday we held a benefit for our good friend Jill Sobule, who just this very day had a little bit of brain surgery. And I want to report that she is doing phenomenally, and we're thrilled to report that she is feeling really good, and very excited to have her back on the show again with us post-brain surgery. And if you saw the pre-brain surgery shindig with John Doe from X, Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine, Debbie Boone, Alan Cumming, and a bunch of other wonderful folks, just see what we have in store for you when she comes back. So just wanted to report to all y'all that she is in good health, in good spirits, and feeling good. So all that is what the Power Hour is about. And what the Power Hour is also about is extraordinary guests like who we have tonight. And David Litt, who says, people who love this country can change it. I think that's just such a succinct and strong statement. Starting at the White House as senior presidential speechwriter and leaving as special assistant to President Barack Obama, and often called the president's comic muse. He is also the author of 2 books that are as meaningful as they are delightful: Thanks Obama, My Hopey Changey White House Years, and Democracy in One Book or Less: How It Works, Why It Doesn't, and Why Fixing It is Easier Than You Think. Which is all well and good. But this quote, this right here, is why I'm so thrilled to really have David on the Power Hour tonight. He says, quote, "The cost of living the dream, I was taught, is the responsibility to expand it for others. It is more than fair price." So without further ado, please welcome to our virtual stage, David Litt, everybody. David, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not hearing you. I'm seeing you beautifully. We definitely need an author and a speechwriter to be heard. You're a beautiful man, but we definitely want to hear you too. So we're going to figure it out, folks. Just give us a second. Do you want to try logging on, logging back in? Bear with us, folks, as we work out some technical difficulties. Seeing is believing, but hearing is everything. So while David's working that out, I'm going to show you, this is the book, Democracy in One Book or Less: How It Works, Why It Doesn't, Why Fixing It Easier Than You Think. Came out just a few months ago. And in the comment section tonight, Haley will be joining us. Haley will be giving you links to finding David online, his social media accounts, et cetera, which are delightful, and also a link to buy the books and make sure you can get them. We have a bookshop.org dedicated list to all our Power Hour authors. We love bookshop.org because it celebrates the authors and also allows a percentage of the sales to go back to independent bookstores.
Okay, so can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Look what I did there.
I figured it out. Sorry, everybody. Thank you for bearing with me. I appreciate it.
No, I vamping is my business, so no worries, my friend.
This was all my brilliant plan to get you to plug the book while I pretended to have technical issues. That was all a scheme.
How are you, my friend?
I'm well. I'm or at least the 2020 equivalent of well, right? Hanging in there and feeling good. How are you doing?
I'm delightful. I'm thrilled, and I'll have to say I never blow smoke. I'm honored that you're here. You were so amenable. The moment that I invited you, you were really down with it, and you put us in touch. And I want to give a shout out to your, and I don't want to misname her title, your assistant, Anna.
Well, so Anna is, I usually describe her as my chief of staff and also my entire staff. So she
Right.
did research on my book. She helps me write op-eds and things. So she does all sorts of stuff, but also helped make sure that this actually happens. So yes, I don't know if Anna's watching or if she wasn't able to, for us both to be on the link at the same time. But either way, Anna, if you're out there, thank you for.
Yeah, I always want to raise up names and give shout outs. I hope you don't mind, but she was so delightful in the facilitating of this. And she was on before. She checked the connection. And when she popped on, I said, "You look really different than the photos that I've seen." So I believe she is watching in Facebook land. So thank you. And thank you, my friend, again. So let's start at this. I want to talk about both the books. I want to talk about your experiences. But as you said, 2020, right? That is the specter. So releasing a book in this time, it must have been fraught for you. So I want to ask you about that personally first. How did you come to that? And did you fear that everything that you had written was becoming almost, and it's amazing because when you read the book, it's almost as though it was written during this moment. It's so incredibly powerful for this moment. But obviously, with the way books are written, it wasn't written now, but it seems as though it was. So I don't think it's luck. I think it's a certain prescient nature of your writing.
Well, here's what I would say when it comes to thinking about writing a book. As you say, it's a strange experience because you have an idea, and then even if you're really fast, it's 18 months or 2 years minimum before that idea is a book that is going to be on shelves. And so if you're writing about politics and current events, you do want to think about what are the underlying trends, the ideas that are still going to be relevant no matter what happens in the world. And I have to say, probably unfortunately, one of the things when I had just finished my first book and was thinking about what I wanted to do next with my next few years, one of the things that seemed really clear to me and to a lot of people who I think had been watching trends in American politics for a long time was that there was this growing gap between what Americans want and how Americans vote and what our government does. And that wasn't going away. So that ultimately became the thing that I wanted to research, the thing I obsessed over for this book, but also just generally trying to figure out how has our democracy changed and why does it seem like our democracy does so much worse at representing us than it did even when I was a kid 30 years ago. And, I was certainly not the only person to be thinking about this kind of thing. Unfortunately, in some ways, it's exactly like you said. All of the chapters of the book seem to have come to life in a way I would have been fine if they hadn't, right? Because I wrote about things like why the Senate is biased against most Americans, or why the Electoral College is so dangerous and completely unnecessary, or why voter suppression is threatening our right to vote to a greater extent than it has since the Jim Crow era. And all of those things came together in this election. I think more than any other election in history, we have just experienced an election that is about, and in some ways with these nonsense legal challenges, is still about the mechanisms by which power is distributed in a country, in a democracy. And that story is going to keep going for the next several years. Even when Trump leaves office, when President Biden or President-elect Biden takes office, that basic fundamental problem with our democracy, that it is not really representative of what people want, that's not going anywhere. And so we're going to have to figure out what the problem is and then how to solve it. And that was my goal, to try to figure out how to do some of that.
I would think, given your experience as a speechwriter, was pivotal to this, right? Because you're talking about, and again, I can only go by watching The West Wing, but I think that's I believe that is nonfiction, but you have to pivot all the time when you're writing for a president because issues and actual just events of the day change what needs to be said, whether it's a sentence or an actual word. I'm sure that all of that, then as an author, you're able to do that, right? That helps you to create that that storyline, as it were.
To me, the key with speech writing, the most important element of speech writing, other than trying to emulate Rob Lowe on The West Wing, of course, is you got to figure out how to connect these big, complicated ideas to people who are affected by them, right? What our government does is incredibly important, but sometimes when you explain what the government is doing in the most basic terms, it's a little bit boring, or it doesn't sound like it's relevant to our lives. And so how do you connect those dots between the decisions being made by people in offices in Washington, D.C., or in your state government or your local government, and the impact that it's having on how the education that your child, the quality of that education, or on the road that you're driving on when you go to and from work, back when, we could all work from offices or from where we work, and a lot of us weren't working from home. So you put all this stuff together, and I think for me that was the challenge with this book in particular, was to say, how do we take the details of our political process, the mechanisms of election law, the history of the Senate filibuster, which means you need a supermajority of senators to get anything done in the Senate these days, the nature of House committees, right? All this stuff. How do you take it and turn it from something that can be dry and frankly turn people off a little bit, and make it clear why the way that our rules are set up, it affects you. It doesn't matter who you are. Those rules affect you directly. And that was my thinking about it. And the other thing that I think is important as a speechwriter, you're almost a proxy for that audience. So there's lots of people in government and in public life who ask what's important. And that's an important question. But speechwriters are one of the only people who ask what's interesting. And you have to combine those two things. You have to find what's important, but also what's interesting about it. And that was the goal with this book. In a different way, it was the goal with the last book that I wrote. And it's also certainly the goal of an effective presidential speech.
So I very rarely correct guests, but I feel you're much more Josh Molina than Rob Lowe. In all ways, I think that there's just the quality, but you're just as cute as Rob Lowe. So that's
I would
there.
Listen, if I can get new business cards made, right? The brains and demeanor of Josh Molina and the looks of Rob Lowe, I'll take it.
There you go. And you can quote me on that.
I will say one of my great regrets from the Obama White House years is that every so often the West Wing cast, they'd like pop by, not all at once, but somebody would be in town or something. And so Rob Lowe did come to the speechwriting office once, and I think it was like 2 weeks before I got there, or it was like, whatever it was. I barely missed him, but Richard Schiff, who played Toby, used to come to the Hanukkah parties. So
yeah,
he got a little West Wing.
He's wonderful on Twitter. I keep trying to get his attention, and he's difficult, but he's been doing great work. He seems like a really good guy. So let me ask you this, if you don't mind, a personal question, because this interests me a great deal. Coming out of the Obama White House and what experience that must have been, and we've been honored to have a few different folks that you worked with. We had Valerie Jarrett on the show. We've had Rafi Friedman Gerspan on the show, and we had Cecilia Munez. I always think that the pivot from leaving that space, which must have been inspirational, of course difficult often, but working with those folks, it's not just about Obama himself, right? It was a whole mess of folks there that were doing incredible work and really caring about the country. The pivot from that must be so difficult, and you really found an extraordinary way to do it. With the first book, Thanks Obama, was a great way for you to kind of re-enter into society, as it were, from that. And then the second book solidified the talents you have individually. But personally, was it a difficult moment for you to figure out what's next for me? What is my journey after this?
It's really challenging. It's obviously the kind of challenge that one is very lucky to have. So I want to be very clear about that. Getting to navel gaze and say, what do I do now after leaving my amazing White House job? That's a good problem. At the same time, it is true, when you're at the White House, one of the most striking things somebody said to me when I left, I did this kind of tour of the senior staff because I figure I'm around all of these brilliant, accomplished people. When else do you get to just pop into everybody's office and say, can you tell me about, life and career and how you think about your path and all of that? And some of the people I spoke to, Valerie, Cecilia, are really some of the people I admire most in the world. I talked to someone, I think this was Sheila Murray in the vice president's office, or at the time she was a senior advisor to the president. And she said, the thing about being in the White House in your 20s is you never have to figure out who you are. And you've just never had to do that. And when you leave, you're going to have to figure that stuff out. And I thought that was a really interesting point, and I didn't fully grasp it until after I left. But that, for me personally, because I was not, like a big deal at the White House, but I did start there when I was in my relatively early 20s, and I stayed till I was almost 30. And so the same years where a lot of people that I know spent a lot of time asking themselves questions about themselves, that was not something you had to do at the White House, because every day there is something going on that you have to deal with, and you don't have a lot of time for introspection. So I was really very lucky that I could leave and write a book about my experience at the White House, because I had to go back and think about not just what happened and what were the funny stories and what when did I embarrass myself in front of the president. I knew all that stuff, but I needed to really think about what it meant and what public service had meant to me while I was doing it, and then also what I had learned that I thought was applicable not just for my own life, but maybe for other people who might read the book as well. And that experience to be sort of professionally required to think about what had happened to me or what I had gone through and what it meant and what it might mean to other people, I was really lucky that I got to do that. That is one thing about being a writer and an author. You get paid to think. You don't necessarily get paid as much to think as you do to do other, as other people to do other stuff. But it's the joy of being an author is that you really get to examine something very closely and deeply.
One of the things I love in your voice in both books is this positivity and this absolute, and it comes up a lot, whether it is right up front and very obvious or just in the background of a lot of what you write, is this real acknowledgement of privilege, of what you said, how lucky you are, but knowing that with that privilege, with that luck, so to speak, comes an amazing responsibility. And I think that it speaks to your innate character and who you are and why these books are so wonderful, above and beyond the funny, above and beyond the stories, above and beyond the meaningful subject, above and beyond the real strong ideas about how to move our country and our democracy forward. It's that feeling that you understand what we owe to each other. And if I may ask, where does that come from? Where does that come from for you?
Well, thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. I guess to me, there's really two places where I think about that kind of that ethic, this question of what does it mean to be a person in the world, and exactly as you put it, what do you owe to yourself and what do you owe to other people, and to the community more broadly. And part of that, I think, is my own family. My family is one of those American dream stories where, I write about this in the book. My great grandparents all fled from Russia because they were persecuted. I have my grandfather who was, went into business, but he didn't graduate college, and he always, I remember my mom telling me stories about him kind of saying, and after a certain point, he had gotten really successful, and he would always make a point of saying to her, "Don't forget anybody, right? Don't forget how hard, the people who are working every day, don't forget that." And then similarly, I think there's, how do I put this? So I think that's one element, right? And the kind of family values and that idea that service, not necessarily community service, not necessarily public service, but some element of service is part of a full life. And then the other thing, I guess I'll give you three different elements. The other thing is partly the Jewish tradition. I'm Jewish, and the synagogue that I grew up in was, I think, not unique by any means, but I think really made a point of emphasizing the combination, the idea that that faith and a religious tradition is partly about the prayers you say and the things you do or don't do for certain holidays or whatever, but it's also about your orientation, your moral orientation toward the world, and the sense of obligation you have to make the world better than you left it, or than you found it, rather. Um, and then the last thing I would say with all that is, the Obamas themselves. I don't think that I discovered this idea of public service from them, but they exemplified it so completely. You started our Power Hour by talking about that idea of people who love this country can change it, and that was something President Obama said in 2008 in the Iowa caucuses. At least that's the first time I heard it, and that idea changed my life. And I remember watching Michelle Obama at the 2012 convention talk about how when you climb the ladder, you know, you don't pull it up behind you. And so the way that they both lived their lives and spoke about the experience of getting ahead and then helping others, I think it was just it made that experience so much more meaningful, because I felt like I was working. Ultimately, the culture of a place flows from the top, and I was working for people who really got it, and they exemplified the best of what America can be.
And and it is so clear in these books, and I thank you for that experience, especially Democracy in One Book or Less. It is such a great book to have right now. And as I said, you probably lost out a lot on book tours and on the experience of releasing the book, and that is something that's difficult. And I feel for that. But for the rest of us to have the book right now, it's really a gift. It's amazing, because when you there's a way to describe the book that it could sound really dry, and you're like, this sounds like a textbook that I would be assigned senior year of high school in my, advanced American Studies course. But you bring it home in such a way, whether you're talking about, and I would love to hear the story of the frat party. Could you share that for a moment? Because it's such a great moment in the book that allows you to absorb all the rest of it, which is so, there's a lot there. And these moments that you put in the book that give us the levity, but also the peek into who you are and your character.
Yeah, well, that to me was an essential element of this book, but of this project more broadly, partly because of who I am, right? I don't get through books, generally speaking, if they're too weighty. And that's not a fault of the authors. That's on me, right? I'm just not the kind of person who can get through it. I know lots of people who can do that, and I admire them, but I'm not one of them. So I wanted to try to write a book about our political process where nobody ever said, oh, this is a book about our political process, right? Ultimately, it's a book about people figuring out how to divide power, and then frankly a book about a lot of rather villainous people trying to hoard power and steal it from the rest of us. And that's been true throughout our history, and it's certainly true today. For me, if there's one person who's kind of the protagonist of the book, certainly not the hero of the book, but the main character, it's not Trump, it's Mitch McConnell. I feel like, when I was in the Obama White House, we started to see this sense that Mitch McConnell, he's not a genius, but he's very smart, and he's very devoted to one idea, which is how do you take maximum advantage of the rules, or rewrite the rules if you can, to get as much power as possible for yourself and for your party. And you don't care about anything else. And when you have someone like that in a position of power like he holds, it really does tremendously damaging things to a democracy. So naturally, I figured I have to go to Kentucky and try to crash a frat party at his old frat house, because that's the way I'm going to figure him out. I don't exactly know, what I was planning on when I first tried to do this, or frankly, when I tried to do it a second time, because the first time didn't work out so well. But for me, I think that might give you a sense of where I started the book. I knew that I wanted to go places, to meet people, to experience the political process in some way that was new and different. I knew I wanted it to be fun. And I also didn't exactly know what I was doing. So, this kind of a book, I think there's two types of nonfiction books. There's books by experts that are about, they know a ton about something and they're going to help you know about that. And then there's books that are about a journey, and a journey from somebody who didn't know a lot to someone who knows a little more than they did when they started, and they take you on that journey. And to me, it was important both because of who I am and how little I knew about some of this when I started, but also because of what I like to read, that this is a journey book. I hope that a reader comes along on this, both, figuratively speaking, to Louisville, to this, to the Phi Tau House on Greek Row at the University of Louisville, but also more broadly from this place of, I have a vague sense of how it works. I know it's not working well, to by the end saying, I get it. I understand why we're in this mess, and also how we can get out of it. Because a lot of the ways we can get out of the political jam that we're in, and I don't just mean this as a Democrat, I'm saying, for people who care about democracy, it's more doable than a lot of us think it is. And that doesn't mean it's easy, but it means it's possible, which is always important to keep in mind.
So you mentioned you invoked the name. So let's talk about Mitch McConnell for a moment. And I'm loath to even give these folks name and give them time, but you are right, he's emblematic, I think. And it's amazing because he doesn't speak well, he doesn't present well, but somehow he has definitely mastered the machinations of how to keep his party in power and how to usurp the very democracy he is supposed to be pledged to protect.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. This interests me because you mentioned it. You said you saw it evolving. So was this, and if I'm overstepping here, this is not something you can actually comment on, just slap me down virtually, but you saw it evolving. So was this a conversation that was had in the Obama White House, seeing this man doing what he was doing, first blocking appointments and doing all the things he was doing? And did you imagine that it would ever get to the point it is now, which is, the very definition of beyond the pale?
So I have to say, I don't know the answer to some of your question, because, whether, for example, President Obama was sitting in the Oval with his senior advisors saying, can you believe this? What do we do about Mitch McConnell? I think we're going to have to wait for round 2 of his memoir to find that out, or at least for me to find that out. I was not at a level where I was in on those conversations. What I did see, and I think, we all saw this more broadly, was this escalation and a willingness to go not just to unprecedented lengths, but to put a lot of people in danger for the sake of a little bit more power. So, to me, a pivotal moment was in 2011 with the debt ceiling crisis, which maybe some people watching remember, maybe some don't. But the short version is that McConnell and John Boehner in the House held a gun to the head of the entire economy in the middle of the crisis, the economic crisis. We're just beginning to recover. And they said, if you don't cut spending on social services, if you don't cut spending that's going to help poor people, we're going to blow up the whole thing. I mean, it was remarkable. And the first time the Obama administration tried negotiating, thought this was just a posture, because in the past, that's what this had been, right? People would sort of make big claims. They would, say, I'll do it this time, but no one would really do it. And then you saw McConnell dig in. And the first time around, I think we got the worst of those negotiations. But to his credit, over time, Obama changed the way that he dealt with Mitch McConnell, and he won a lot of those future battles. But there's moments when you can't, basically on paper. So a good example of this would be like the Merrick Garland situation in 2016. And I had left the White House by then, but, Tony Scalia died. There was a Supreme Court seat open, and McConnell said, we're not going to fill it no matter what. You can do a lot as president. And I'm sure historians will argue over, should Obama have said this thing or done this thing differently? Fundamentally, and this is why Mitch McConnell is so powerful when he is powerful, is he's very good at recognizing when words don't really matter, right? The rules are on his side or the math is on his side, and he doesn't have to be inspiring. He doesn't have to be right. All he has to do is do what he wants. And that is the, in some ways, kind of the secret to Mitch McConnellism is that if you don't care about anything else, all you care about is the rule book and how to change it or manipulate it or take advantage of it. If you're that single-minded, you can accomplish a great deal. I don't think Mitch McConnell ultimately will succeed in his project, which is to create a kind of one-party democracy where Republicans win all the time. But I do think that he succeeded more than people would have suspected in, say, 2006 or 2008. And I want to just make one last we could talk about Mitch McConnell all day, but one last Mitch McConnell point. I do think that the Biden administration is coming in recognizing that Mitch McConnell is who he is, right? There's not, in 2008, there was a sense that Mitch McConnell was an institutionalist. He cared about his own legacy. He cared about something. We know at this point who this guy is. And I think, he's going to be obstructive, but at the same time, no one's going to get caught unawares. So I do think that's a very big difference this time around.
Then that is very important to recognize. And, I don't want to say enemy, so that's not, I don't want to use that terminology, but to recognize the difficulties that are going to be faced and have a platform to engage in that.
I think that's exactly right. And I think your point about, I don't think of Mitch McConnell, I don't like the word, enemies when we talk about politics. I'm sure I've used it, and then regretted it. But I think that it's important sometimes it's interesting because politics, it has a moral dimension. I mean, so much of this is about what's right and wrong and about what our values are. But sometimes it is helpful to step back and just say, okay, Mitch McConnell is fundamentally, I cut this from the book, but blaming Mitch McConnell for trying to, hoover up as much power as possible is a little bit like trying to blame like my Roomba or, my off-brand Roomba for trying to vacuum up as much dirt as possible, right? It only knows how to do one thing. So the question is what we do about it. And there's a moral component to all of that. I'm sure that history is going to judge Mitch McConnell very harshly, but in the present, so it can be very useful just to say, okay, what do the pieces look like on the board, and how do we maximize our chance of winning these important fights in order to do the things that reflect our values?
And again, I'm sorry to be disagreeable, but a Roomba, it has one job, is to clean up dirt. McConnell's job is far more than just vacuuming up power. It's supposed to be about protecting us, right?
Yes, I would say, to really torture this analogy, it's like when if the Roomba runs across the cat's, like the cat's sleeping and the Roomba attacks it, right? The Roomba doesn't know. And I just want to point out, we should elect politicians who don't think of their job, to your point, as vacuums for power. That is not what politicians should do. It's not good for the people of Kentucky. It's not good for America. It's worked out that way, but it has not been good for the American people that we have a political leader, or and frankly, at this point, many political leaders who see their jobs in this one-dimensional, power-hungry way. But generally speaking, I think sometimes we assume that this is a choice, and often it's just someone's orientation toward the world. The problem is, how you change the incentives so that no matter how you're oriented toward the world, you have to do the right thing. And I think that's what a good government, that's what the structure of government is meant to do, right? Because we're never going to elect perfect politicians. It's not a secret that a lot of people who run for office are deeply flawed in all sorts of ways. So ideally, you have a structure for a democracy that helps steer people toward acting in the public interest, even if that's not how they see the world naturally. Instead, we have kind of the opposite. It's like harder than it should be to be a true public servant, and it's easier than it should be to be corrupt or power hungry or partisan.
But you also argue something great in the book, and I'm sorry I don't have the quote, but I'm sure that you'll pick it up, that it's not only about being good for the country and being good for the people, but it's being good for the individual. Because you say in the book that to do good, to do public service, there's not much we can do as individuals. But it's important we do it, perhaps even first and foremost, because it fulfills us as people. And otherwise, we are not who we can be, right? There's a passage in the book about that. And I think that's a really important, meaningful thought that you share as well.
Yeah, I think that's something I learned when I was working in government in the Obama White House was, I don't think that if I hadn't been there, would American history have been different in any meaningful way? Of course not. And I think that's generally true. I'm a big believer in working on political campaigns or, in working in government, working in nonprofits, working in activism. But generally speaking, with some very, very rare exceptions, the world does not need you in the sense that if you weren't there to do the work, someone else would do it, or they wouldn't. Um, and that can seem nihilistic, but it's really not. To me, it's just a reminder that one of the reasons that we do this kind of work has to be because that's what makes a life fulfilling. And I do think that, I particularly thought about this because I was in government in my 20s, when there's a lot of thinking about how do you become successful. And I think that public service, whether it's your full-time job or a part-time job, whether you get paid for it or you volunteer, public service is what helps you succeed, but also succeed for a reason. And I do think that that's there is really something very hollow about a lot of successful people. And a lot of the time, the thing that is missing is some element of service, some element of living your life for someone other than yourself or maybe your immediate circle. And so I do believe that. And I think one of the things I should say that makes me very optimistic about the future is when I talk to younger people, when I talk to college students or high school students about my experience or about the state of American democracy. I think that's more ingrained in a lot of young people today than it was even when I was, growing up 15 years ago. I think there is a sense that is almost a given that you should have a cause you care about. You should have some element of service that animates your life. So that's one of the things that makes me very hopeful about where we're headed, even though, of course, we have plenty of problems to deal with.
So I just want to say for people just joining us, we are thrilled and honored to welcome David Litt to our virtual stage tonight in the Power Hour. We're talking a lot about this book, Democracy in One Book or Less, and our wonderful volunteers throwing up a link to order this book from our bookshop.org link, which allows you not only to buy this book and also this wonderful book as well. It also supports local independent bookstores. What's wonderful about bookshop.org is when you put in your shipping address, it goes and finds local independent bookstores to support in your area as well. And the reason I'm hawking the book right now is because I'm going to ask you a difficult question now. Are you responsible for Trump being president? Because you wrote a lot of Obama's remarks for the White House Correspondents' Dinner. And many people focus back on that dinner where he needled Trump from the dais, and that caused the fire to burn in Trump's belly to become and to exact his revenge on the entire country, if not the world. Were you at all responsible for any of those remarks?
So I don't mean to disappoint. It's not that difficult a question because I had been at the White House for about 4 weeks when that dinner was, the 2011 dinner. So I became kind of like the token funny person on our speechwriting team starting in 2012, and I wrote some jokes for the 2011 dinner. But that year, the person in charge of crafting the monologue was John Lovett, who I'm sure a lot of your listeners know. He's one of the Pod Save America hosts. And he was in charge of the dinner, and he wrote with Judd Apatow. He worked on a lot of the jokes that really just roasted Trump. And I should say, I'm not trying to pass the buck. I wish I had written that stuff. It was hilarious. So, and I was there. So it was the first White House Correspondents' Dinner I ever went to. And I remember kind of being in the back of the room, and you could see Trump, and he, turned like beet red. What was really interesting about that dinner was that I don't think that's why he ran. He has a huge ego. And I think generally speaking, if you have an enormous ego and you think you can plausibly become president, you start to take it pretty seriously. And he'd been flirting with running for president for a long time. And I think he wanted to improve ratings on Celebrity Apprentice, which had started to drop. I think that, to me, what really stood out that room, the White House Correspondents' Center, back when we could gather in rooms like that, we had a mix of people. And so you don't usually get everyone laughing at the same joke, especially if it's about somebody, because there's, it's not all Republicans or all Democrats. You have a mix. And everybody in that room was so happy to see Barack Obama just roast Donald Trump. Not just the Democrats, not just the Hollywood people, not just the reporters, but also like Reince Priebus was in that room, right? That like Sean Spicer. These were people who would go on to sort of swear fealty to Donald Trump. And at the time, they thought he was not just a joke, but a dangerous joke. And so it was really a story to me, to some extent, about how if you're not careful, Joe Biden always says to people, like young people who want to run for office, he says, the thing you have to know is, what would you lose for? And I think even if you're not running for office, if you don't know what you would say no to, what would you back away from? When would you quit? When would you get out of the game? You can go along with anything. And I think there were a lot of people in that room on the Republican side who just went along with anything, even though they knew better.
So let me ask this. My next set is this. So you became what you've been called the comic muse of Barack Obama. Can you share with us one or two jokes that you didn't get to use that you really wanted to see happen and weren't ever delivered?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I think President Obama, obviously, he has a great sense of humor and particularly a really good sense of timing for jokes and delivering jokes. Something that he also could do when he was doing these monologues that I think was maybe underappreciated. He had a good sense of what is funny because it kind of matches his persona, but it plays with it, it exaggerates it in some way, and what is not right for him. So I remember, there was a joke, this was in 2013, I think. We had just done this charm offensive, or I think we were still doing it, trying to just invite Republican senators over to the White House to watch football games or whatever, and hoping that maybe that'll break the logjam, which obviously didn't work very well, but we tried. And I didn't write this joke, but I liked it. Someone else pitched it. And the joke was, I learned all this stuff about Republican senators I never knew before. And it was about how the Senate is like a big high school. And I explained the joke to the president, and he said, I don't really get it. And I said, well, you have to do it in like a Valley Girl accent. And he said, what's that mean? And, he kind of gave me a look, which in retrospect, that look meant like, let's move on. In practice, I thought the look meant, please demonstrate. So
yeah, please tell me more.
Yeah. So I turned to the president. I said, you have to say it like, well, I was talking to Ted, who was talking to Lindsay, who was talking to John, and they were all like talking. And then I kind of had this moment where I realized I had just done this in the Oval Office next to the President of the United States. And he looked at me and just said, yeah, that'd be funny if a comedian did it. And then I took the hint and moved on immediately. But, I do think he was right about that, right? That he understood that part of a politician telling a joke is that it's a politician telling a joke. So it has to be something that is unique to them, that works for them, that wouldn't work if a John Mulaney, for example, was doing the same joke. And then another joke I remember that, sometimes it's also just a matter of like certain things people respond to and certain things they don't. I remember the year DC decriminalized marijuana, I wrote a joke where the punchline was, Rand Paul just gave a 13-hour filibuster on whether or not the Taco Bell is still open. And I thought that was really funny. And President Obama did not think that was funny at all. He was just like, I don't get it. And so, the thing about the way we would do the jokes is we would both in terms of what I would write, and then also more importantly, in terms of what we would get from, at least a dozen writers, we'd have hundreds of jokes, and I would try to cut that down to maybe 40, and we'd bring those into the president. So if he didn't really respond to something, if he didn't find it funny, we didn't try to sell him on it, except in very rare circumstances. Usually we would just kind of say, okay, let's move on to the next thing. And I think that's part of the difference between speech writing and some other kinds of writing. When you're writing speeches, even funny speeches, the person giving the speech is always right because it's their words and it has to feel true to them. Otherwise the audience can tell.
You mentioned before that Judd Apatow was one of the folks that was involved with that 2011 dinner, and often, such as yourself, write pieces that are ghost written that you don't get credit for. That someone asks you, "Can you punch this up? Can you give me a little bit here?" Are there some pieces that you've written under that same guise where you have just come in and punched something up, or been of service, that you're really proud of, that you wish you could have put your name on or could have gotten the credit for, that you're like, that was golden, that was something I'm really quite proud of?
Well, I think speechwriters are kind of divided into two categories by temperament. Some speechwriters I know, their favorite part of the job is that you don't get credit, right? That you're behind the scenes, you're working on something, you're writing, you're a writer, but you don't have to be in the spotlight or at this, when or deal with rejection in quite the same way, and certainly not public rejection that you might in other kinds of writing. And then other speechwriters, they enjoy the experience and they want to write for people who they admire, but they also, the fact that it's a behind the scenes job is sometimes like a bug rather than a feature. And I think I would say I'm in between those. I mean, clearly, I left the White House and then I wrote books under my own name, including a memoir, and I write a lot of articles and op-eds and stuff, under my own name. So I like that experience of being the person who is expressing a view, and it's clear that it's entirely mine, right? I'm not helping someone figure out how to express themselves. I'm expressing myself. But then at the same time, I do think there's, something that can be really gratifying about working with someone, doing something that goes really well, but it's not something that is really, how do you put this? It's not like, it's different than it being your work. You kind of help them do their work. I mean, the analogy I use in the book is that speechwriters are more like personal trainers. You can help someone put the best version of themselves forward, but you're not turning them into somebody they're not. So I do think that's ultimately, the short answer to your question was yes. There's plenty of things out there where I'm like, oh, that went pretty well. No one else knows that I worked on it. Although not a ton of those, but there's a few. But I think there's also something that's nice about being able to kind of go from, sometimes being the person whose name is on the thing to having a role that is more behind the scenes. And so I feel very lucky that I can sometimes go back and forth like that. And then the last thing I would add with all of that is, I would say the other thing I learned as a speechwriter is that you can't be a good speechwriter if you truly believe at the end of the day it's your work, not someone else's work. Because if it doesn't feel true to somebody, if it doesn't sound like them, if it doesn't have their ideas, then it's not gonna connect with audiences. So you have to be thinking about, if I was writing a speech for you right now, I wouldn't be thinking, what do I want you to say? I'd be thinking, what do you want to say? And then I might try to shape that in some way. And more importantly, I might try to help you say that in the most effective way possible. But they're very different craft-wise, writing for oneself and writing for someone else. It was a long answer, but there's a lot to unpack there.
That's why it's the Power Hour.
Fair enough.
When you hear Obama speak now, do you ever think, oh gosh, I wish I could have written a remark for him, or I wish I could have given him something right there?
No, I mean, in the sense that that was an amazing job. And so every so often I'm like, oh, remember when I used to do that? That was pretty cool. How did I get that lucky? Sure. And, certainly when he speaks, I have what I think is a pretty universal reaction, especially until Trump leaves office, which is like, remember what a president sounded like. It's just so it's refreshing, but also comforting in a way. But no, I mean, I think one of the things that, President Obama used to say, I think he said this in a couple of different people have quoted him saying, he always thought he was a better speechwriter than his speechwriters. And a lot of politicians think that, and that's not true. I think in President Obama's case, it was totally true. I mean, you see this in the book that he just wrote, but also in the consistency of the speeches that he has delivered from before he had speechwriters, when he was a state senator, all the way till his post-presidency. He's had some excellent speechwriters. I've been very lucky to work for some great chief speechwriters who he's had. But I think anyone who's written for him would agree that, he's the common thread there, right? I mean, he's a phenomenal, not just a speaker, but a really phenomenal writer and a consistent thinker who knows what he wants to say. So, I'm under no illusions that, President Obama is sitting around now saying, well, if only David were here writing a couple of lines for me. I think he's all right.
No, I totally agree, but I would think that it was such an incredible experience for you to be part of that voice, and
Yeah.
then right. It is phenomenal to speak with you, and I cannot believe how quickly the hour has gone. We have a couple of minutes left, so no spoilers for the book. But one of the things you promise is why fixing democracy is easier than you think. So in our last couple of minutes, tell us how do we fix democracy?
Well, one of the most important things to fixing democracy, unfortunately, at this moment, is to have a big majority in the House and the Senate. And I will say, when I wrote the book, that was my hope. So I think, some things, they're not necessarily off the table, especially if these 2 Senate races in Georgia are won by the Democrats and Democrats have a Senate majority. But some of the biggest sweeping change is going to have to wait at least 2 years before we can do that. But 2 years isn't that long a time in the grand scheme of things. And, when we think about the gridlock that we see in Washington, the fact that, the Senate is not reflective of the American people because all of these states that have very small populations get the same number of senators as a California or New York. And regardless of what party you support, that's not fair. We can fix all that stuff. And even without a Senate majority, for example, as President-elect Biden prepares to take office, there's things you can do to make voting easier for everybody. You can have a voting rights division of the Justice Department that starts to prosecute voting rights violations again, as opposed to sort of tacitly encourage them. You can have, the census is a huge element. The Trump administration tried to rig the census and sabotage the census to make it harder for likely Democratic voters to be counted. There's a lot a Biden administration can do to try to undo some of that damage. Gerrymandering is another really good example. Some states, Democrats have very little they can do, but in other states, there's a lot we can do to have fair districts so that people actually get to vote in a way where their vote matters. So all of this stuff is, and this is, I think, a very important point with all of it, is all, when it comes, it's like the opposite of a downward spiral, right? Where every time a Mitch McConnell or a Donald Trump breaks a little piece of our democracy, it weakens the whole thing. So it makes everything else easier to break. But the reverse of that is true as well. So once you start to fix our democracy in small ways, it makes everything else easier to fix. And the 2 other elements to this that I think are really important, one is what's happening at state and local levels. So we're seeing this now with all of these state secretaries of state, including, I have to say, some Republicans who have stood up to the president, where a lot of the election administration that makes the right to vote real and then makes our democracy real happens at the state level, and state legislators have a huge role in that. So what's happening in the states matters. And then the other really important thing is just making sure that we're paying attention. So much of what Mitch McConnell and his allies have done, they've been able to get away with because they did it while the rest of us didn't really notice that something was up. And I think that has changed, right? When we talk about campaign finance and gerrymandering, and when we talk about the obstruction that we're likely to see in the Senate, these are no longer concepts that people say, well, we started this conversation saying, how does this matter to your life? I hope people read the book. I hope you get a clearer sense of how it all matters to your life. But I think most people now go in saying, yeah, this matters to me in a way that was not true when I started in politics, in 2008. So all of that together makes me very hopeful that we can start get things on the right track again. It's not going to be easy, but like I say in the book, I do think it's going to be easier than a lot of people think. Thank
you so much. So these are the 2 books we've been talking about all night. Thanks, Obama, which is the first book, and then the second book, which is, there you go, Democracy in 1 Book or Less. The links are in the comments section. Please do buy these books. Buy one for yourself, buy one for a friend, buy one for an enemy. You'll become a friend. Call your local library. Make sure they have copies of both these books. If they don't, you request that they go on the shelves, because there are some folks in our community who can't afford to buy books, and that's how they get introduced to important topics, important ideas, and important folks like David Litt. Thank you so much for your time tonight. Really appreciate it. It was really an honor and a thrill to have you on.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. And I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind, I know that we've kept you after school for a bit. I'm going to say goodnight to our community. And if you just hang out for a minute in the green room, as it were, I just want to say goodnight to you personally and thank you myself. Thanks so much again. Be well, my friend.
All right. Thanks.
So that's David Litt, everybody. The two books we've been talking about all night. Again, Democracy in One Book or Less. And thanks, Obama. Here they are together. Look how pretty they are together. So purchase these two books. Support David. Support democracy itself. So we are here every night, 7 p.m. The Power Hour takes place 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, with extraordinary folks like David. But more importantly, it's folks like you will come out and watch this show. We supply the hour. As always, you supply the power. Until tomorrow night, 22 hours and 55 minutes or so. Please be good to each other. Be good to your families, chosen or otherwise. And as most especially at these moments, be good to yourselves as well, my friends. Much love and respect. Have a great evening. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.
In every community, a group of angelic troublemakers.